think here we are. Hello, good evening, everybody. I want to welcome you here to the Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show, a show dedicated to progressive rock and other forms of rock music. So, we're here for my live stream, Friday night live stream, into the Progverse. I've chosen a different topic than I've been doing lately, which was basically zeroing in on a particular band. And last week I did the top 10 thing, but this week I'm going to do a kind of a top 10. I guess it's a top 10, although I'm not really putting these in any particular order. I've just picked 10 of my favorite progressive rock guitarists. I didn't necessarily put them in any order. I'm not even sure if I got the best 10 here. I think these are the 10 I like the most, but it's not necessarily true. But nevertheless, whether these are the 10 I like the most or they're in any particular order, it's just these are 10 that I like a lot. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. If you've got any comments about it, your chat comment board is open. You can put questions or comments there, and I'll try to answer them and acknowledge your existence as you are acknowledging mine. So I got my drink, so I shouldn't go dry as a bone because I don't really want to do that. And so I've kind of, when I was kind of deciding, well, which 10 guitarists should I pick, I basically wanted to stay with pure kind of prog stuff. Well, as pure as you can get. I mean, obviously, prog music in its very nature often includes other genres in it. But I've tried to pick 10 guitarists that I've always considered to be prog guitarists. Now, there are some other guitarists who people might include as prog guitarists. So either I don't really listen to them much, or in some cases, I don't really think of them as prog guitarists. I think of them as hard rock guitarist or glam guitarist or art rock guitarist or whatever you want to call them. But generally speaking, I want guys that are primarily known for that progressive rock sound. So I'm going to put my tea somewhere else because I don't want to keep reaching across the screen to get it. So we're going to start out by they're stacked here. The 10 of them are stacked, or at least not them, but the CDs that I'm going to use to represent them are stacked here. So I'm going to just go with the way they're stacked. It's not really any particular order, just the way they turned out to be. So the first one we're going to talk about is this one, or this guy, David Gilmour of Pink Floyd. I chose this album because this is the album. Yeah, this is the album where I really kind of realized how good he was. He's very different from a lot of the other ones, mostly because it tends to be more melodic, slow. A more melodic and slow guitar player with some really, really forward, powerful guitar riffs, I think, and his soloing is fantastic. At one time, I would have maybe thought of this guy as being a bit of a bluesy type guitarist as well, but I don't really think of him that way. I kind of think of him as just being unique, completely unique. I like some of the newer Floyd albums, the ones without Roger Waters, not because the lyrics are that much better, because they're not. Even the songs may be a little bit wimpy in some cases, or maybe just not. I guess wimpy isn't probably a good word. Maybe something like they're not really as well known. They're not really as well written, I guess maybe might be a word used, but the guitar on them is really good because at that point in time, they weren't really dominated by Roger Waters anymore. He's gone, and Gilmour was the main attraction. So the guitar was, of course, going to be more dominant. But in this case, all the stuff on this album in particular, I think is great. Even Animals and Wish You Were Here have a lot of really good stuff on them. I like his acoustic ability quite a bit as well. It's very melodic, very clear sounding. But I think the thing that really sets him apart was when he does that soloing. It's so emotional. Got to be one of the most emotional guitar players in prog for sure. Just, you turn out the lights, you crank up the Floyd, and you hear the guitar is the dominant instrument, of course, with it. And you get to hear all of that emotionally charged guitar soloing that I think personally that David Gilmour is one of the best at. So that's kind of my first guy tonight. So my second guy is maybe a little bit more in the modern history, although not really. I mean, maybe a decade or so ahead of what we were just talking about. We're talking about Steve Rothery of Marillion. Now, I just got this album recently, although this was my first Marillion album. I had it in vinyl, and I also believe after I gave my vinyl collection up, I was at a record store and bought a whole whack of cassettes, and I'm sure that this was one of them. I never really liked cassettes much. They were just easier to store at that time. I didn't want to get into vinyl, and CDs were still not really around. Well, there's no CDs at that point in time when I moved out. So, I kind of went with the cassettes because I wanted space. This is a really solid album by them, but you could pick any of the albums, their early ones, the Fish era ones, that I like them all pretty good. I think his guitar is a dominant part of that too. Lots of catchy stuff going on. I wouldn't say he is the most dominant person on the album. I think the whole band is pretty strong there. I do like his guitar sound quite a bit. This was released in '83, so you're talking maybe, God, that's 40 some years ago already. I still think of these guys as newcomers to prog, but they're really not anymore, are they? So I'm just going to pull this out for a second. I believe I've listened to this once since I got it. Went through it once. Most of the stuff I know quite well. So, you've got Fish, Mick Pointer, Pete Trevoyes, Steve Rothery, and Mark Kelly on this. This is when I think the band was probably at its best. But I like his use of acoustics. But I think of him as an electric guitar player. Strong stuff, but not really. I wouldn't say he's like a standout solo guitarist or a dominant figure on any of the albums. He just adds, put it backwards. He just adds that element to their music that is necessary to make it happen. So any really good prog band that has a guitarist, the guitarist has to be almost the forward guy, because that's the part that I think is the most dominant part of things. Sometimes it's the keyboards, though, so you can't always be that way. But to me, primarily, it's the guitar player. And I think Steve Rothery, he's a prominent member of this band, but he's also a prominent guitarist. I think of him as being one of the best of the prog guitarists. Again, not overly dominant, but strong, So that's my second guy we're going to talk about tonight. So the number 3 guy, this guy I like a lot more. I find this guy's music heavy. His guitar is very prominent, dominating in all kinds of ways. I chose this album because I didn't want to use Tap in the Ocean again so quickly, but you can see that like the intricacies of this album is fantastic. The backside is almost as good, maybe better in some ways. Roy Albrighton is the guitar player's name on this album. These guys, to me, are underrated instrumentally. They're all really solid. Um, you can't really appreciate it until you've listened to them for a bit, though. Lots of really good stuff. Um, and Roy is to me um, the guy. Well, he's the dominant guy, the leader of the band for sure. And I'm just looking for the info on them. I just wanted to see if there it is. Yeah, he also does the vocals as well. You got Ron Howden on here too, who I think is very strong on the drums, and Derek Moore, of course, bass and vocals, as well as Alan Taft Friedman. So it's a strong complement foursome here. And Roy to me is the leader. He's heavy. To me, he gives Nectar that heavy sound. Maybe not so much on this album as maybe Journey to the Center of the Eye or Tab in the Ocean, which are much heavier albums. And the reason I think they're heavier is because of his guitar. He's a heavy guitar player with some really good lead parts, but not lead parts that are overwhelmingly dominant, but strong lead, what you would expect to have from a very progressive band. And this band, although I think of them as I always think of them as progressive. That's the major element, but they do have that metal sound to their music as well. I've talked about this when I did the video on Tab in the Ocean. But I think his guitar part is the thing that really is the dominant part of the album, even though the other guys are good. I just think that especially the lead parts, he's just strong, heavy, and catchy. That's the other word I was looking for. Getting catchy kind of rhythm sections and parts that just kind of dominate most of their albums, I think. So the next guy out of the gate is absolutely different, completely different from Roy and even Steve Rothery. Maybe it's dominating, of course. Here we go. This is the album I chose because I think this is probably the one I like the most that I own. Although I do like their debut album a lot too. Yeah, just some really solid stuff. So this is during the time when they have Pete Bardens is also with the band at this time. So strong group of musicians here, all four of them. There's a nice shot of them all. Of course, we're talking about Andy Latimer. Sorry, I didn't mention his name right away. Andy plays quite a bit of stuff here. He also plays some flute. So he's a little bit different than a lot of guitar players. He has a little bit more of a repertoire. The music is very almost pastoral in some ways. It's much tame. It's softer. The vocals are a bit weak, but the guitar playing is absolutely dominant for this band. He has a style that's kind of, I think it's probably a little bit closer to what people would have thought of Steve Hackett as being early on with Genesis, that kind of quiet, sophisticated, great additions to the music, strong guitar playing, but not particularly heavy. In fact, there is Mirage, which is a heavier album than this. I don't own that one. I've tried to get it, but I haven't found it yet. But for most of his stuff, it's very kind of intricated into the kind of soft sound that Camel is. And I don't think of him as being an aggressive guitar player, but I think he could be, and I think he can be when he wants to be. But I think of him as being more intricate, playing different sounds, creating directions, not being so dominantly forward as you would get with Roy Albrighton. So I like his stuff a lot. I think he is a great player. And to be honest with you, I think he's underrated. A lot of people don't even know who he is, which is really strange to me. Like, this guy is one of the better players out there, and he doesn't get kind of the attention that some of the other ones get. Anyways, Andy Latimer of Camel is another guy I like a lot. So the next guy up, again, very different from Andy Latimer. You would never confuse these two at all. You might confuse them a little bit. Well, I don't think you'd confuse him with anybody really, to be honest with you. Yes, he's much heavier, definitely in that same kind of heavy sound that Royal Brighton have it, but very different sounding. And we're talking about King Crimson's Robert Fripp. Now, for me, Robert Fripp started on the David Bowie stuff. That's where I first heard him. A little bit on the Peter Gabriel stuff, but of course he's dominant on this. I just chose this particular album. He can be very quiet, very unassuming guitar parts, little bits here and there, but that's not the Robert Fripp I'm thinking of. He's got these kind of a really heavy, definitely very noticeable forward guitar play, strong, heavy, adventurous is another word I would use to describe him. Catchy as hell at times, but heaviness is the main thing when I think of Robert Fripp, and he's absolutely one of the best progressive rock guitarists out there. To me, it's just so unfortunate that King Crimson only did a dozen albums. To me, like, it seems like they could have easily done a lot more, but I understand his kind of philosophy about it. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand it. But he's such a strong guitar player. Like, his picking and his lead parts are like unlike any sound. Like, it's very distinctive. It isn't like any of the other ones I've mentioned up till now. And just really catchy as hell. And of course, it's like so many of the King Crimson albums, it's very different on a lot of, like, each of the albums is different. Now, this one and the debut album have a lot of similarities between them. I think that was the sound that they were trying to capture at that time. And of course, Greg Lake's voice brings a kind of symmetry to the two albums, but then it goes off very different on the next few albums. Lark's Tongues and Aspic, really well-written album as well. Fantastic guitar and drums and bass and everything on that album. But yeah, so King Crimson's Robert Fripp is the next guy up. So now that's 5 guys we've done. Those are, to me, maybe the 5 guys that I more recently discovered. Maybe not. Maybe Robert Fripp. I've, of course, known him of him and listened to him for a long time. Some of the other guys, Rothery, I've known him for a bit of time as well. So maybe, and of course, David Gilmour, we can't say we didn't know that. So maybe that was a bit of an erroneous thing to say. The next guy up, though, another one of these guys, very underrated, from Gentle Giant, Gary Green. This is a band that has, to me, all of them are underrated. This is one of the best progressive rock bands out there. Not only is it one of the best progressive rock bands, it has some of the best instrumentation of any progressive rock band. I chose this album because I think Gary Green stands out a little bit more here because of his guitar picking, his ability to play different sounds, his lead ability, his ability to create intricacies within the band. And this band has so many different instruments going on so much of the time that it would be difficult for any one of them to stand out, although I think Gary is a fantastic guitar player. I like his when they're doing their kind of catchy up-tempo beats, his ability to fit the guitar in there and to still stand out even after with all that stuff going on. Yeah, great guitar player. Very underrated. I believe he may be the most underrated guitar player out there. If you ask most people who's Gary Green, they wouldn't be able to even tell you. They might think he's like a pitcher or something like that. But this guy is fantastic. And again, a little bit of a shame, the same as King Crimson, that they stopped when they were still young. They could have gone on for another 10 or 20 years. We could have tons of stuff by these guys. It could easily be one of the most dominant bands in history. for me, they're one of the best. That's good enough. And Gary Green, a strong member of this band as well. So, not to mention the fact that the harmonies on those bands is really good. Even though we're talking about guitarists, you got to acknowledge that. The next guy out, maybe the kind of sweetheart of the internet now, as far as music goes, as far as guitar player goes. A guy who didn't get much of a due early on, suppressed by other members of his band, and not really out there as far as people would know. Maybe one of the most underrated guitar players of the 70s. He's getting a lot more attention now because people are beginning to realize how good he is. Even me, like I always knew he was really good. Because I guess I should tell you. So I chose this album because it has some of his best stuff on it. We're talking about Steve Hackett, of course. The Shadow of the Hierophant. Incredible song. Absolutely incredible. As is so much of the stuff on there is really good. I always thought of him as kind of a quiet, more acoustic dominated guitar playing, lots of classical sounds, intricacy, but not a really heavy guitar player until the last album came out, in which he was absolutely scorching on that album. Now he has taken some heat from some people for things that don't really make much sense to me, but I think he's a fantastic guitar player. Definitely one of the best of the 70s. And though underrated back then, not so much underrated now. Yes, his acoustic and classical parts are among the best out there, but his electric stuff is not something to be ignored. He can be very heavy metalish when he wants to. He can do those metal type guitar solos, which really surprised me when I heard it. I didn't think he was a guy that would do stuff like that. But great guitarists can do anything, give them an opportunity and a venue, and they will reinvent themselves to play whatever's needed to be played to be part of whatever it's doing. And I think Steve Hackett, of course, really exemplifies that. Just a strong guitar player. The good thing about him, too, that I like is, like other guitar players, he has a lot of his own stuff. Not just the Genesis stuff, but a lot of his own stuff. Unfortunately, in the Genesis stuff, he was kind of suppressed and put in the background way too much. And in my personal view, he was probably the best musician in that band. So Steve Hackett. So now we're down to just three guys left. I chose this album because this is the one I kind of discovered this guy on, and I like all the stuff on this. It's a masters collection of original masters by Jethro Tull. This was my first Tull album, and it got me into him. So, of course, this one does have Aqualung, but it's not really a song that I never really cared much for. I like some of the stuff he does. Living in the Past, really kind of pastoral. There's a little bit of that. Sweet Dream, which is Promise. A little bit of Thick as a Brick is like that too. Life's a Long Song, although the acoustic part in Life a Long Song, I think, was done by Ian Anderson. But he does have some of that acoustic sound to his music and more quieter stuff. But the stuff that really stands out is the riffing and the heaviness of songs like Locomotive Breath, Bungle in the Jungle, Minstrels in the Gallery. Even a little bit of Songs from the Wood is like that too. Thick as a Brick has got that really great acoustic parts to it as well. This guy can do it all, and I find his guitar playing really catchy. I don't know if that makes any sense to you. His rhythm parts are almost as strong as his lead parts. He's not an Ace Frehley with his kind of iconic sound. He's just a guy who is really good at doing what he does. And to me, another guy, very underrated, Martin Barr. Sorry, I don't think I said his name. I might not have. So I'm probably going to take some heat by people who only watch the first 20 seconds of the video and then say, Oh, you don't even mention the guy's name. You don't even know his name. Well, I do know his name. Sometimes I forget to say it because I do get tired quite a bit. Anyways, I wanted to give a shout out to Martin Barr. I think he's fantastic. The thing about Jethro Tull, there's a lot of guys in this band that never got kind of noticed as much as Ian Anderson, but they're all fantastic. So down to the final two. These two are not going to surprise anybody. I kind of saved them from the end because clearly they're my first and second. So we'll do the first one first. Rush's Hemispheres was the album I chose because I think it exemplifies how fantastic Alex Lifeson is. The thing about Alex Lifeson I love is, and the reason I've listened to him for so long, is he knows how to write catchy riffs. The guy's like a riff master, maybe the best of all time. But it's not just that. His lead parts are so iconic as well. Like some of those solos he does, just absolutely ripping. And, you listen to a song like La Villa Strangiato and you say to yourself, wow, I could never, ever imagine playing that. It's just so good, so catchy. He knows how to put stuff together that really makes a song catchy and is different at the same time. Even some of his riffs, like Anthem. Anthem is a good example. They're kind of different. They're not your normal riffs that you would find. They're kind of a little bit, remind me a little bit of Barracuda. It's kind of a couple things going on at the same time. Yeah, he's just a really absolutely fantastic guitar player in every sense of the word. I believe it was Eddie Van Halen when he was asked, "What's it like being the best guitarist in the world?" And he said, "Well, maybe you should ask Alex Lifeson that." Yeah, I really think. And the thing about Alex Lifeson is, as good as he is, he's in a band with people, that a bass player and a drummer, that are more noticed because of their abilities as well. So, but all three of these guys are fantastic in every sense, and this album exemplifies that. This is the album that they reached beyond themselves to put together. Probably a hard thing to do, but every song on here really good. The catchiness of his guitar, the crispness of it, the lead parts are catchy and gripping. The funniest thing about La Villa Strangiato that I really like a lot is that you can sit there listening to it and it goes by so quick, but yet it's almost 10 minutes long. And some of the live stuff is even longer. And it's the same with all of the songs that he does. That Xanadu is another one like that. Starts out with some really catchy, more pastoral type sounds on the guitar, and then it just becomes dominant. It's the most that iconic riff, or whatever you want to call that, is so memorable. And he does this again on Natural Science, when the keyboards are kind of leading it in a direction, and then his guitar just takes over and just dominates the song in a lot of ways. Bytor and the Snow Dog, with the dogs growling, and the just like stuff that you just won't hear on a lot of other bands. To me, Alex Lifeson, other than his sense of humor and his guitar playing, there isn't really anything about him that I can't like. He's just a very likable guy. The guitar playing, exceptional. His sense of humor, fantastic. And you know what? He's humble too, because as great as his ability are, you never kind of get this feeling like he thinks that he's just all that, right? And when you do get that with some other guitar players, but not with him. And he would be my favorite easily, if not for the next guy, which is Steve Howe. I know there's people that don't like some of the tone that he has. They prefer like maybe some of the tone on Drama, or maybe they would prefer a heavier sound. It's not really his style. I mean, he can do it. All great guitarists can do whatever they have to do, playing with the music they have to play with, but he never really had to do that with Yes. Although, he has some of the most fantastic solos, Sound Chaser, incredible stuff going on there. But he's more of an intricate guitar player, playing intricate pieces, sophisticated, intricate pieces. And like Steve Hackett, he's exceptionally good with the acoustic guitar, maybe better than he is with the electric guitar. But I've seen him play slide guitar. I've seen him play some of the stuff they played that was a little bit more jazzy on Relayer. I've seen him play, even that simplistic stuff that he played with Asia, I thought even that was a little bit more intricate than you might get with a lot of pop albums. This album was the reason I chose this album, because this is the one that kind of made me stand up and realize how good he was, especially like on Starship Troopers. It's a type of song that you can just listen to it and it kind of takes you away from yourself, Yours Is No Disgrace made me realize how fast he can be when he wants to be. Just absolutely great sounding. Oh, we got a visitor here. Wimp Wounds, I want to thank you for joining me here on the channel today. We're discussing Steve Howe at the moment. So Steve Howe, this is the first album that he was with on Yes. He's been on like most of their stuff over the years, except for that pop era in the 80s. And also, even some of his own albums, which are not really commercially great, and the vocals are kind of weak on them, but the guitar on that, all the different guitar sounds he likes to use, really catchy. I actually seen him playing live once just on stage by himself, and I was blown away with how good and how fast his hands are and how intricate his picking hand is. To me, he's the best guitarist. He's been my favorite for a long time. I know there's going to be people out there who'll say, well, this guy's better and that guy's better and this guy's better. And they may all be better. I don't know. But for progressive rock, he's my guy. He's the guy I love. He's the guy I can listen to all day long and never get bored with. And so those are the 10 that I picked out. I'm just going to reiterate them so people don't forget who they were, and then we'll talk a little bit about some other progressive rock guitarists that I didn't put in. When you're doing a 10, you can't do 12. Then it's not a 10 anymore, right? So we got Steve Howe from Yes, Alex Lifeson from Rush, Martin Barr from Jethro Tull, Steve Hackett from his own stuff and Genesis, as well as other stuff that he was involved with, Gentle Giants, Gary Green, Robert Fripp from King Crimson, and an assortment of other people, including David Bowie and Peter Gabriel, Andy Latimer from Camel, Roy Albrighton from Nectar, Steve Rothery from Marillion, and of course, David Gilmour from Pink Floyd. So some of the other ones that I didn't include that kind of came to mind as I was doing this, these are people that I'm not as familiar with because I haven't listened to them enough really, and I even had them down and I can't remember some of them right now. So we're just going to talk a little bit more about this other stuff until my brain clears up. Just getting really tired, hard to keep track of stuff with. If I don't have my props, sometimes my brain just won't take it in. There's a lot of bands out there that are fairly new to me. Ellesmere's a band that comes to mind. I do like the guitar stuff with them, although I don't know the guitar player's name. Some people might say bands like Styx, Kansas. Those two bands come to mind that often people will say that the guitarists with those bands are progressive in a lot of ways, and they're not wrong. But I tend to think of those guys, J.Y. and Tommy Shaw and the guy in Kansas whose name is just completely out of my brain right now. Those guys are all really good guitar players. Even Journey's Neil Strauss, especially early on when it was more progressive. These guys are all great guitar players, but to me, I don't really think of them as progressive rock. There's progressive elements for sure, but I think of them more as hard rock type bands. That's why I didn't really want to include them here. Trying to think of some other people here that I like. Eloy has a good guitar player in that band too, and Frank Borman, he's exceptionally good too. Could have included him here. Even I had actually had Dave Brock from Hawkwind as somebody I was going to put in my list too, because I do like his stuff. It's more melodic and very spacey, but I decided to go with the 10 I had. So he needed to be mentioned here as well. Even like some people might say there's a progressive element to Led Zeppelin as well. And if you're talking about Led Zeppelin's progressive element, you have to talk about Jimmy Page. But I think of Led Zeppelin as more of a blues, hard rock, heavy metal type band. Although even the heavy metal part, I don't really. To me, the best stuff that Jimmy Page does was that acoustic stuff he did on Led Zeppelin 3. It's kind of strange, but that's the way I feel about it. Yeah, so there's lots of people out there that you could definitely include. There's a lot, like I said, there's a lot of artists. Like the guy from IQ, I like him a lot too. There's a lot of artists out there that I'm only now getting into. I like the Warbler stuff and the the Chronicles of Father Robin stuff, really good as well. Even the guy in Caravan, he's kind of quirky, but definitely they're a progressive band. This is a band that you're going to hear a lot more from me about as time goes on. I've only got the one album. The other albums have been difficult to find, but yeah, for some reason I just took off on them. I love them, but I never got into them until kind of late into this year. So I didn't think it was fair to put him into that position. Even Greg Lake, I do like some of the guitar stuff he does, mostly the acoustic stuff, even though I don't think of Emerson, Lake and Palmer as, to me, Emerson, Lake and Palmer is the dominant child. There is Keith Emerson and Greg Lake's vocals. And, you could say that Palmer's drums are very dominant as well. I don't think the bass or the acoustic guitar or the electric guitar is dominating with them bands, but it's still good stuff though. Like I don't have a problem with any of it. I just didn't think that really qualified as progressive rock. These were the ones that I think qualified to be on here. Maybe a couple of the other bands I mentioned that could have been in here as well. But I didn't get them. And then there's a whole host and horde of stuff that I've been getting into. I do like the new John Anderson album as well. And whoever the guitar player on there is pretty solid. In fact, when he did, even when Dennis D. Young did his tour, the guy that he had, the two guys he had playing guitar for him, kind of even looked a little bit like Tommy and JY and absolutely handled the job perfectly as well. But I don't really think of these guys, again, I don't really think of them as progressive, even though they are. Jade Warrior is another one with some really intricate sounds on it. Atomic Rooster, the guy in Atomic Rooster is really good, or at least the album that I've heard, I like his guitar parts. It's got a little bit of a jazzy feel to it as well. But I wouldn't call them overtly progressive either. They got progressive elements. I think if I had to label them, I would probably label them more as a kind of bluesy psychedelic band. So I know some people think of them as progressive, but I tend to think of them as maybe not so progressive as you want. And you could even say the same thing about Triumph. Triumph has a lot of progressive elements to the music, but I think of them as a hard rock kind of bordering on heavy metal band. But if you were gonna, and you have Rick Emmett in that band, who is absolutely incredible guitar player. not just with the electric stuff that he does, which is really catchy, his catchy riffs and his guitar soloing, which is fantastic. It's also his acoustic stuff is really strong too. But I think of them as more of a blues, hard rock, heavy metal with some elements of progressive rock to them as well. Then, of course, that would bring up Winterhawk as another band like that who very triumphantly sounding with a lot of the similarities to them, and the guitar player in that band is fantastic as well. But for me, these were the 10 that I liked the most. If I was going to rank them, I would probably put Steve Howe at the top, followed by Alex Lifeson. Then if I had the rest of them, I would probably put Steve Hackett in third place, Gary Green in fourth place, and Robert Fripp in fifth place, followed by Martin Barr in sixth place. That leaves the bottom four. Yeah, this would be tough because they're all so vastly different, but I think you got to go with David Gilmour, seventh, Andy Latimer, eighth, and Roy Albrighton. I think that would leave Steve Rofferly at the bottom, but I mean, he made the top 10, so it's not really like he's bad or anything like that. So I do like all of them, and all of the music that I've been talking about too, about the bands we've been talking about here tonight. All of them, maybe the best parts of most of them are the guitar playing, because the guitar playing is really what brings out the music to me. Yeah, with Yes, you might want to go Rick Wakeman a little bit dominating. You can't say enough about Bill Bruford, and bass tones for Chris Squire are unbelievable. So, I mean, even as good as Steve Howe is, he's not going to dominate any of those guys. The same with Alex Lifeson. He's not going to dominate Geddy Lee or Neil Peart. You might even go the same with Steve Hackett. I think Steve Hackett was the best instrumentalist in Genesis, but he wasn't dominating over Phil Collins. He wasn't dominating over Tony Banks or even Mike Rutherford. Still, really, all of them are solid. And that's probably what makes progressive rock the best music out there, because of the intricacies of all the music, not so much just the guitar playing. Anyways, I hope you've enjoyed this kind of reminiscing about my favorite guitar players in progressive rock. And I've tried to mention some of the other guys. I know I'm missing people, but so if you want to add people to it, that's great, because I've noticed with progressive rock too, a lot of these guys don't get the kind of notoriety they should get, and so any kind of notoriety for them is great, I think. Anyways, I hope you've enjoyed this episode, this live stream of Into the Progverse. We're going to continue with this on Friday nights. Even though I'm usually exhausted by Friday night, and it's amazing that I can't remember my name sometimes. But I still like talking about this kind of music, and prog music being my favorite. That was why I chose to set up this particular show. If you've enjoyed this, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss. I will be doing another one next Friday, of course, at 8 o'clock. And I think next week we're going to stick with the same kind of theme for the next little bit. So I think I'm going to go with bass players next. So we're going to do 10 progressive bass players. I pretty much know the 10 that I like without even having written them down. Maybe there might be 12 or 13. I might have to cut it a bit, and I'll try to give as much of my intricate thought about them as I can. I'm still learning. I'm not really a guitar player mindset. Maybe a little more bass player, but not really. Keyboards, of course, even maybe less. But drumming has always been the thing that has captured me as more than anything. But anyways, I hope you've enjoyed this. If you got any comments, or you want to mention people that I forgot, or you want to talk about bands that maybe I didn't bring up here, There's a couple of progressive bands I don't really follow. There's a lot of progressive bands I do follow who haven't followed long enough to really give an intricate stuff on. If you want to put those in the comment section, you can do that as well. And we will be back at 8 o'clock again next week on Into the Progverse. My name is Murph. Have yourself a good evening, and thanks for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. Take care and goodbye. And now, how do you end it? Here it is. Oh, didn't think there